Hey guys, this is Julian of Julian Gray Media, and in today's video we're going to discuss the elusive vocal chain, the perfect processing to get your voice sounding good in a song. Of course, like anything in music, everything is subjective, but these are things that I find work on all of my music and all of the client mixes that I work on. We're going to outline the recording process, the processing in terms of tuning and timing, and then of course the elusive vocal chain that will make it sound like magic. All of the presets used in this video, including the vocal chain for Ableton Live 11, will be available for download in the description below to all of my patrons and to anyone who follows the channel. You just have to click on the link and make sure that you're subscribed. So without any further ado, let's jump into Ableton and get started. If you enjoy this video, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive perks, including project file downloads, tools for your creative process, early access to videos, and more. Click on the card in the upper right-hand corner for more information. Okay, so we're gonna start things off with a few tips on the recording side of things. There's a few things that I'd like to mention, and these are things that are going to make it easier for you to process your vocal and basically get a solid vocal out of whatever you record. One of the first things to mention is if you go into your Ableton Live preferences, or whatever DAW preferences for that matter, make sure that you're running the maximum sample rate that you can handle without, audio hiccups on your computer. The sample rate is essentially the resolution of the audio that you're recording, how high quality and how true to life the recording is. So you always want to record at the highest resolution you can, and you can always play back and process your voice or whatever recording you're doing at a lower resolution, but you want to capture it at the highest resolution possible. I always shoot for at least like 48 or 96K when I'm recording. The one caveat to raising your sample rate is obviously CPU performance issues. So if you're running into issues where you can't record while you're playing back the project file, it's not the end of the world if you record at lower sample rates. This is also important when you're stretching. So sample rate is basically how many times the audio is sampled within a given period of time. So if you're running at 48, you're going to be sampling that audio in real time and essentially, for lack of a better word, frames, twice as fast as 2400. Or like if you're running 96, you're going twice as fast as 44.1 or 4800. And the more samples you get in a period, the higher resolution it is, as we've described, but it also allows you to stretch things more. So if you have 2 samples versus 4, when you stretch it, it's going to sound less organic than if you stretched a sample that has, 2 frames within that same period. So in general, the higher the sample rate, the more organic or the more true to life or the less destructive warping and stretching becomes when you're dealing with that. And if you have a really good vocal performance that's perfectly timed, you don't have to deal with that, but that's very unlikely. Most people have to do a little bit of timing adjustment, and sometimes when you're stretching and warping in either Melodyne or Ableton, you end up with a little bit of weird audio distortion or warp artifacts. So again, it's a bit of a tangent, but always record at the highest sample rate you can. Another tip I have for you vocalists out there that are recording your own voice, see if your audio interface, whatever you're using, has a audio pass-through for the headphone output on your interface. So a lot of people like to record into Ableton. They'll add like an audio channel and they'll set it to in. So like you're listening through Ableton through your microphone back to your headphones. And if you do it this way, you can monitor all your effects on your channel, but you're going to be running into latency problems. So if you're playing back and you have your buffer rate set to 256 samples, whatever you hear is going to be at least 256 samples late. So if you're singing into the microphone, I'm sure if you've tried this method before, you're going to run into this weird effect of like you're speaking, but what you're hearing in your headphones is slightly delayed. You can circumvent this with a direct audio line through on your interface, and a lot of interfaces have it. Like the typical ones are like the Scarlett 2i2 or like the Apollo Twin or the Apogee Duet. They all have versions of this, so make sure that you're looking into this. And what that lets you do is bypass Ableton entirely, circumvents all of the delay that you'll face when you're processing your audio from analog to digital and then digital to analog twice. and you'll get a better performance because you're going to be hearing yourself in real time instead of dealing with, that delay. It's like trying to play a MIDI keyboard with a few milliseconds of delay, and it's really hard to keep up. One other thing to mention, and this is pretty important, is your microphone placement. If you're recording really close to the microphone like this, you end up with a very like ASMR type, too close for comfort sound, which can be used in a stylistic way to create really interesting vocal lines. But if you're just trying to get a neutral vocal, you're going to want to stay maybe a foot away from the microphone, at mouth level or slightly below mouth level. And you don't want to be too close or too far away where you're getting a very different tone. I would encourage you to experiment in the context of your song with different mic placements. It can influence the EQ of your voice a lot, or not necessarily the EQ, but the spectral balance. If you're really close up, you tend to get a lot more low end. If you're really far out, you tend to, focus more on the high end. And a perfect balance like right here is going to get you a more balanced result, which is generally desirable. So those are the 3 recording tips. I'm not going to record a vocal in this video, but I want you to try those things the next time you're recording your voice or recording somebody else's voice if you're, a studio producer or what have you. I think that those 3 things will make a big difference in the rest of the production process. I always believe in creating the best thing, writing the best material, or recording the best thing so that the mixing process becomes easier. Then, of course, the mastering process becomes easier, and the whole process is dependent on the previous steps. So you always want to make sure that your generation, your like writing, your recording, your synthesizing is the best quality possible. So that way, when it goes up the ladder, up to mixing or mastering, it'll make your life a lot easier. So we're going to start things off today with this vocal here from my good friend Lovely. She has incredible collaborations with Ferry Corsten. She just had a huge release on Anjuna Beats. She's having a great year, and she's an incredible vocalist. We're working on some material together, but this is an older demo of hers that she gave me permission to use for the sake of this video. If you haven't checked out her music, she's incredible. Go check her out on Spotify, Apple Music, or what have you. I'll put her link down in the description below. So we have this raw vocal here. The first thing I like to do when I get a vocal like this, and this is something that you will skip, obviously, if you're dealing with a vocal recorded directly into a session, is I want to find the exact tempo of the vocal. And the easiest way to do that is to grab this, copy and paste it into the session mode. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fish for the tempo with the fader here. And we're going to play it back and try to match up the metronome to the tempo we're hearing in the record.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it. Holding on gets worse. Your love leaves me wondering.
Okay, so I'm sure you can hear me pounding on my mouse here. And we've basically got a generalized tempo of 77 beats per minute. What I'm going to do is turn on the metronome again. We're going to hit play again and see if that... And maybe I'll, round this up to 77.
Happiness, remember the way I was before you, fighting the fear that I might lose you next.
Okay, that sounds about right. What I'm going to do now is, now that we've matched our tempo to our vocal here, what I'm going to do is engage warp. And you never want to engage warp when you're off tempo. You only want to do this when the tempo of the DAW is in perfect time with your vocal. That way it locks onto 77, and this will be in perfect time. So then what we're going to do is switch this to Complex Pro. It's the best algorithm for warping complex vocals like this. And what we'll do is copy this back into our arrangement now. Here we are. As you can see, the vocal now has the warp markers. We're good to go. If we wanted to change this tempo, like let's say you dragged in a sample from Splice, you wanted to find the tempo, you just did this whole process. Now that this is warped, as you can see, I'm free to maneuver this. And as you can see, the vocal stays in place. It follows the tempo of whatever we're assigning now. So it's free to move now. We have a very nice general fit of the vocal here. What we'll do now is we'll listen through. Maybe we'll break this into pieces. Like these are obviously big chunks. and we will do subtle timing adjustments from within Ableton Live. So I'm breaking this up. That's probably good enough for right now. I just don't want to, deal with timing large chunks at a time, because as you know, if you've ever warped vocals, if you move one point, it moves the entire thing. And we just want to, keep these designated to these small little portions here. So what I'm going to do is keep the metronome on, and I'm going to try to sing the vocal to myself, or like listen for it and try to get it exactly in time. We can use the Command 1 and Command 2 or Control 1, Control 2 to adjust our grid so that we can see exactly where it's starting within our arrangement here. That way we can really see exactly if it's starting on the beat. I think it is. So let's go ahead and play this now.
Hold you close every night.
Okay, so I think this first one is good. Maybe we can push this to here.
Hold you close.
And we can just, wherever we see a line that's very close to a, one of the 16th notes, we can just drag it on so it fits.
You close every night. You close.
Let me play it from here.
Hold you close.
I think this is actually late.
Hold you close.
Just gonna delete this time here.
Every night.
And you can see a lot of patterns here. Like this bar starts about a 16th note late, so maybe this one follows the same thing. A lot of times with good songwriters, it's a pattern. It's the same rhythm again, so you're gonna want to follow that same pattern. I think this is actually late.
Hold you close.
Just gonna delete this time here.
Every night.
That's sounding good.
Trying to find.
This part should be really easy because it's so staccato. We'll just grab these and put them, to the beat.
Trying to find my happiness. Trying to find my happiness.
Let's do this.
Trying to find my happiness. Remember the way.
Yeah, cool. And sometimes if you see transients like this that are, not perfectly in time, but they sound okay, that's all that matters at the end of the day. So I want to impose on you that it's not essential to move every single transient into time. It's only correcting things that we think sound off.
Am I a slave to your pet?
So like this sounds fine, but this is clearly late. So I'm gonna try to move that over.
Am I a slave? Am I a slave to? Am I a slave to your?
So like 2 is obviously late.
Am I a slave to your?
Let's see if I can fix that.
Am I a slave to your past?
Yeah, that's about right.
Am I a slave to your past? Are you the?
And I'm just adding this pin here so it doesn't move this transient now that we're pushing the next one over.
Past? Are you the one to make it everlasting?
Yeah, nice.
Love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt?
So I only want to grab, 1 or 2 here or there on this one. I want to keep it as organic as I can.
Oh, in the ending comes it's.
So it's is early. Awesome. So that is our timed vocal. Next step in the process, now that we've, gone in and timed individual transients that we think are a little bit too far out of time, is to take this into Melodyne. So Melodyne is the industry standard tuning program. It's the best and most transparent tuning there is. I swear by it, and most engineers, especially in the pop world, use it a lot. What we're gonna do is go into our plugins, and if you have Melodyne, you should be able to do this too. If you go in, you can just drag it in. I'm gonna use the audio unit Melodyne, load it up. And I actually have, I think, the second to highest tier, Melodyne Assistant. You actually need Assistant to do more of the intricate audio editing, and we're gonna be using some of the higher end features. You can follow along as much as you'd like and as close as you can with the version of Melodyne that you have. So what you do is, to get this in Melodyne, what you're gonna do is hit transfer, and it's gonna move the audio from Ableton into Melodyne. So we're gonna pick a chunk of this. I'm not gonna do the whole entire song today because it's gonna take too long. But what I'll do is I'll grab maybe this last part of the verse into the chorus here, and we'll treat this stuff. So I'm gonna just select this part and do transfer. So what we're gonna do is hit transfer and then press play. And what it does is Melodyne basically records the audio from the channel it's on into Melodyne. And then from now on, whenever you play the track, it's gonna play the Melodyne audio instead. So let's go ahead and hit play.
Your love leaves me wandering.
Awesome. So now we have the entire thing in Melodyne. The first thing I like to do is the basic Melodyne setup. So we got to figure out what key the song is in. If you are singing the song or if you're writing the song, you probably already know this. I can probably deduce it just by, playing a note, so we can figure this out really quick.
Oh, in the ending comes it.
Could also be A sharp minor.
Holding on gets worse. Your love leaves me wandering.
I think it's C sharp though. We'll go with that for now. I think they actually share notes. Let's go ahead and run with A sharp minor. And what that lets you do is it locks the keys. So once you type in the key up here, it locks the keys that you use to, the ones that are within the scale. So what happens is if you have a note that's outside of the scale, it's very easy to see it. Like if she's saying anything that's, this is kind of dodgy. It's not quite on the D sharp and it's not quite an E. And the E is not in the scale, as you can see here, it's grayed out. So because we set this to, the right key, now we can visually see, okay, whenever there's something there, it's going to be incorrect. The first thing I like to do is Command A or Control A, and then do this button here, correct pitch. And what I do is just max out the pitch center. So this is, essentially locks the key to the closest pitch that it's in. You can also use some pitch drift correction too, maybe like at a 75%. And this just addresses if the singer goes off of pitch throughout the runtime of the note. And if you click snap to chord scale, again, like I was saying, it'll snap it to the scale that we're in. I'm not going to do that here because I don't know that this is actually the right scale. I think it is, but I'm not sure. But if you know your scale and you set this perfectly, you can do that, and then it'll actually automatically put the notes in the correct scale for you. I just use it personally without the snap and just as a reference. My ear is always the most important thing to me. Okay, I'm going to press OK, and now as you can see, the notes are generalized to their closest cousin as far as what note she was trying to sing. And some of them might, have gotten it wrong. The algorithm doesn't always get it right, so sometimes the note will be, the wrong one. Like this doesn't look like the right note. It looks like an A natural instead of an A sharp or a G sharp. But let's go ahead and play this through, and then we'll do some more heavy correction as we go through.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, in the ending comes, it's never worth it.
So it's already better than it was, but there's some other tools that we can use to improve this even more. So what I like to do is right click, and we can actually look through the tools here that we can use. There's the pitch tool, which allows us to adjust, the pitch drift between notes. So if you have one note that's corrected a little bit too much and you want to make the transition a little bit more organic so that it doesn't sound like, T-Pain auto-tune, we can, adjust that pitch and make it drift a little bit more between. Then we have the pitch modulation tool, which allows us to address how much the pitch is modulating around the key center. So if we actually pull this down, we can address, you see in the original clip, she drifts from this B sharp up to the C sharp. If we flatten it down, she'll start on the C sharp. And you can get some really good results out of this, but if you do it too much, it ends up sounding very inorganic and very fake. So you got to be careful when you're doing this.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So like that's okay, but it's a little bit too fake.
I
I would personally keep a little bit of the drift in there so it sounds more real.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So oftentimes I like to use it more as a subtle effect rather than trying to flatten everything down to a line, because that's like old school auto-tune T-Pain sound. If you're going for that you can do that, but I'm just going for a more organic sound, which is I think most people are.
Your love.
And if you're going for that T-Pain sound, you might as well use auto-tune instead of Melodyne. So I'm going to do this for, notes going through. We'll give this a pass of this first, and then we'll go in and use the other tools to correct other stuff. So this one's a little bit drifty down here. I'm going to speed up the video, and we'll go through each note and try to flatten them out and address them. So that A is clearly wrong. I think she was going for the G sharp.
Love outweigh the hurt. Oh, in the ending comes it's never.
So that change to the G sharp from the A natural created this weird edge, and we're going to address that with that aforementioned pitch tool. So we can soften that curve a little bit here.
Love outweigh the hurt. Oh, in the ending. Love outweigh the hurt. Oh, in the end.
So it almost sounds like there's a third note in there, and we'll address that in a minute here. But let's go and carry on through with our pitch modulation correction. So I'm just trying to soften the modulation on some of these notes so she stays on pitch more consistently.
Love outweigh the. Oh, in the ending comes it's never worth it.
I don't want to destroy her vibrato, though. It's very pretty.
Oh, in the ending comes it's never worth it. Holding on gets worse.
Okay, that's clearly wrong.
Oh, in the ending.
We'll address that in a minute, too.
Oh, in the end. Oh, in the end. Your love leaves me wondering.
Let's try to flatten these a little bit.
Your love. Your.
That's the wrong note.
Your.
Okay, that's way wrong, too, so let's move it up. And let's address this pitch tool. And now if you look at the actual curve of the pitch, we're going to try to match this down to a note that we know is in key. She was like way down here where she started and then drifted up to here. I'm going to just... Maybe we'll do the bottom one. Yeah, that sounds much better to me.
Your lovely, lovely, your lovely, your lovely smell, your lovely smell.
Cool, perfect. And then what we'll do is we'll focus on the next tool in line here, and I'll show you what we're going to use next is the note separation tool. So as you can see, there's a few transients here where this is clearly two notes, and you can't really adjust the modulation because the top note here is a totally different note. If we actually played that back,
me wondering.
And it's two notes. So what we can do is select that tool I was talking about, the note separation tool, and if we double click on it, it splits it into the two notes that we're hearing. That's just an algorithmic error on Melodyne's part. It detected that as one note. And then we're going to rerun the pitch drift and pitch center correction. And then it's going to, lock in the same way. And now it's much better. And, you'll in time with practice with Melodyne, you'll spot these two. Like, this is clearly two notes. This is clearly two notes. Let's see. This could be read as two notes, probably. This might be a two as well. Yeah, this one's clearly two. Clearly two notes. If you see a big curve like that, it's a pretty dead giveaway that it's actually two notes. This could be two notes, and this could also be two notes, but this sounded good, so I'm not going to adjust it. But yeah, so on the ones that we just fixed, or maybe actually I'll just do another Command A and fix pitch drift 75%, so that we can address all those two note sections that we just fixed. And usually, you'll do these all in tandem, so like you won't go pitch modulation and then pitch tool and then pitch note separation. You'll do these all together, so you'll break a note off and go chronologically instead. I'm just trying to show you all the different tools.
Wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, in the ending comes it's never worth it.
That's wrong.
Your love leaves me. Your love leaves me.
Yeah, and then like I was saying in the beginning, make sure that you don't have notes that aren't in the key. So I just saw that the G natural. I don't want to have a G natural. I want that to be an F sharp or a G sharp. If it's a note that's below, like let's say we have right here, this is clearly below the G sharp. I'm gonna bring that down to the F sharp.
Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it.
So sometimes it doesn't sound organic, so what we'll do is we'll go in with our pitch tool, and we can adjust it that way. So again, soften that curve up a bit.
Oh, in the ending.
That's a little bit better.
Oh, in the ending comes.
Let's keep doing it.
Oh, in the ending comes, it's never worth it.
Yeah, very nice. Awesome. So that sounds good and tuned to me. If we hear any other adjustments while we're working on it, we can, adjust them. But that sounds like a pretty decent tuning to me. What I like to do after I've tuned my voice, and I'm just gonna, highlight this section and make it a different color so we can identify it. This is the tuned part. Is I'll go into Melodyne, or the Melodyne channel, and I'll actually freeze this. So I don't advise keeping the Melodyne plugin as your audio source. It sometimes gets dicey and the timings get wrong. So what I like to do is just freeze the channel. I'll add in another audio track, and then I'll Alt or Option drag this out so that you have, this is the tuned vocal frozen down to audio. That way we can also, if we unfreeze this, we can just catalog this. So now this is not being used, but we have this to go back to if we ever need to make adjustments to the dry vocal. But now we have this processed, time warped, and melodined vocal here. We can start getting into the vocal processing. So let's go ahead and play this once through to hear it, just so we can hear how it sounds without any processing, and then we'll dive into the vocal processing chain.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it. Holding on gets worse. Your love leaves me wondering. Your love leaves me wondering, wondering.
It's sounding very pretty. The next thing we'll do is go through the vocal processing chain to make this really come alive. So in the description of this video, I've built a audio vocal processing chain that you can download and ingest into your Ableton Live 11. I've done one with Ableton stock plugins only, and then another one using Valhalla Vintage Verb, which is a great vocal reverb. It's like $50, and it's something that I use all the time, and it's a lot of engineers' favorite reverb. So we're going to start things off. I'm going to use the Ableton stock one. Just drag it in, and this is what you get. To get under the hood, we can click on this button here and then click on the chain twice. There it comes. And this is the basics of every good vocal chain, in my opinion. I think the most important element of a great vocal chain is an EQ. You use an EQ to rebalance the priorities of a vocal, or basically anything you put an EQ on. With a vocal, especially a lead vocal, you're going to want to prioritize the high end. You don't want a ton of mud in the low end. High end is generally perceived as closer and more present. If you think about like how a voice sounds 1 foot away from you versus like 20 feet away from you, the big difference in the sonic characteristics of the voice is the voice 20 feet away has a low pass on it, or not necessarily low pass, maybe like a low shelf, cutting off some of the high end. In nature, high frequencies don't travel as far, so our ears are kind of trained to believe that high end is present and close and makes it alert. That's why a lot of things like sirens use a high frequency. And the reason why low frequencies are used on boats and stuff like that is because they travel further for the same logic. Anyway, we want to make sure that the vocal has a high priority. The high end of the vocal should be the main element. And you can do this either by reducing the low end or by boosting the high end. I actually discussed this in a recent video, but boosting the high end is the same as reducing the low end, give or take the difference of decibels. I'll put a diagram on the screen right now. In this circumstance, I've used a high boost to address the balance, giving the high end of the vocal, a little bit of leverage and making the high end the priority. That allows us to really get that shimmer and that spark and pop of a really clean and present vocal without having all that weight of the low end. So let's go ahead and play this through. I'm going to go ahead and mute the compressor and reverb here, and we'll adjust the EQ parameters here to really show you what I'm doing.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So I'm going to turn off the EQ first.
Your love leaves me wondering.
And a lot of this can be addressed with that aforementioned comment I made earlier about like your mic placement. But very clearly she was recording close up to the microphone. And there's a lot of boxiness and a lot of low end in her voice. And it's really dragging down the voice. It's making it very muddy. So what we're doing is we're carving off some of that low end.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt?
Now granted, this might be a little bit too much for this voice.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So what I've done is actually made macros that you can address here. So if your voice is a little bit lower, let's say you have a male vocalist or something, you can drag this high pass down, down to the 100 hertz or something.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So it has a little bit less of a cut. If you bring it all the way up,
your love leaves me.
That's way too much, but it's for vocals that are like, singing in the the extremely high registers that you don't even need that low end at all.
Your love leaves me.
For her, I think maybe like 150 hertz is nice.
Your love leaves me wondering.
And then I've added a bright dial, which I've colored the EQ parameters in orange here. The bright dial is this high shelf that's boosting the high end. And like I mentioned before, a boost in the high end is the same as a reduction in the low end. So essentially what we're doing is doubling down on our cut in the low mid.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So
can
that's
love
flat
outweigh the...
with just the high pass. If we give it a little bit of bump up top, we're going to prioritize the high end and we're going to make that vocal shine.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt?
And then now that we've dialed it in, let's go ahead and A-B it.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love...
See how this sounds almost like it's in a closet?
Your love leaves me wondering.
And then this feels very bright and open.
Your love leaves me wondering.
It feels like it's come out of, the muffled room that it's in. So the next parameter to any good vocal chain is a good compressor. A lot of people actually record their vocal in with a compressor on the voice, specifically like an analog compressor, because analog compressors do it better. You can get a lot more warmth out of those. But I actually don't believe in doing that. I like to record in dry and then do any compression, after the fact. I don't want to print all of the effects into the vocal that I'm using. It makes warping and Melodyne and stuff a little bit more difficult. But yeah, so we're using a compressor after that EQ, and even with the Ableton stock compressor engaged, we're going to have a much better tone.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it.
So the key to a good compressor on a voice is to not over compress, but to trim off a lot of the dynamic range. So we want to reduce the dynamics of the voice. We want to get rid of a lot of the higher, louder peaks and bring them down to, a reasonable level.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt?
So this might actually be a little bit too much because as you can see, the gain reduction is getting a lot of cut.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So what I can do is, reduce the input volume, and you can do that here. I actually didn't make that part of the parameter, but if we just increase the threshold a little bit here, maybe I'll add a threshold dial to this.
Your love leaves me wondering.
You see how we're now only cutting off the absolute peaks of that.
Your love leaves me wondering.
And what we're doing is we're reducing the dynamic range of the vocal. We're making sure that the signal is nice and flat and as loud as possible.
Your love leaves me.
Just as an example to show you overcompression, this is what that would sound like.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love...
And that's like the typical, you hear it on a radio show host from some DJ that doesn't know what they're doing.
Your love leaves me...
You get that effect. If you're ever trying to get that effect, that's exactly this. Sometimes I'll do this just to be more on brand if I ever do a radio show or a vocal line for radio. But generally, you don't want to overcompress your voice like this. It sounds terrible in the context of a record. So you want to, make sure that your threshold is not set too low to where it's overcompressed, but you don't want to set it too high where it's not doing anything. If you set it up here,
your love leaves me...
It's actually having no effect in the vocal. You kind of want to grab the high peaks like that, but not all of the peaks.
Your love leaves me wondering,
Something like that. Actually put in a gain dial here with the intention of being the threshold, because basically if you have a fixed threshold, you can gain it up into the threshold and make it louder or what have you, and then it's essentially the equivalent of dragging the threshold up or down. But unfortunately this vocal is very loud, so I'm at minimum gain and it's still too loud. So maybe I'll have to add a threshold dial to this, but I just didn't want to overcomplicate it for all of you out there. But yeah, for those of you watching the video, you can address the threshold here, or you can, turn your vocal signal down here if you want, and it'll act as essentially the same as moving your threshold dial. So the third is a more subjective tool. This is dependent on your genre and dependent on your song. A lot of times in pop music, the key to a really great vocal is no reverb or delay at all. You just want it to be completely dry. If you think of artists like Billie Eilish or like Lorde or those sort of, anti-pop artists, they don't use a lot of reverb at all, and most pop is going that way. You don't use a ton of time-based effects like reverb and delay. But for dance music and trance, and a lot of the viewers of this channel are probably writing that sort of stuff, we use a lot of reverb. So let's go ahead and turn that reverb on. I added 2 parameters here for reverb. Now let's go ahead and play this as it is.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it.
So even without any adjustments, this already sounds good because I've dialed it in. But let me just walk you through why I made the decisions I did. So as you can see here, the dry wet is determined by I believe the amount. Yeah. And even at the maximum amount, we're only at 25%. The minimum amount, we're at 0%, of course. I had it somewhere here like at, 14%? And that's because if you use a 100% dry wet on your reverb, you're essentially pushing the vocal back. If you think of how we perceive reverb in nature, it's like if a voice is here, you're hearing maybe 10% of the room reverb around the voice that's speaking to you 1 foot away from you, and the rest of it is like 90% dry. If you take somebody and push them 30 feet back into a big coliseum, you're going to be hearing maybe like 10% of the original voice and 90% of the wet signal. So in order to avoid that psychoacoustic phenomenon of somebody being 30 feet away or like sounding like they're in this massive hall and you can't even make out what they're saying, you don't want to use your reverb. So the most important and crucial thing to reverb is the dry wet. You don't want to use more than 10 or 20%, maybe at most 30% in like trance and progressive music. If you get past that, you end up starting to get into the realm of like, this doesn't sound like a lead vocal anymore. It sounds like a wall of sound. It doesn't sound like a crisp top vocal, and it would be diminishing to any of the other processing that we've done thus far. So in my Ableton stock vocal chain, I've made the parameter for dry wet max out at 25%, and this is the maxed out vocal reverb.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love out.
And I think that that's way too much even. I just did that for those of you who want to use it on trance and stuff. If I put this down to 14 from 25, you'll hear the difference in how the vocal sounds like it's coming towards you and more present.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth.
You see how when I swept it down, it sounded like she's getting closer and more present and more intimate and more personal? Whereas when I sweep it up,
your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt?
It sounds like she's getting further and further away. So that's the phenomenon I wanted to show you, and also like something to keep in mind when you're mixing in general is that reverb doesn't make things sound bigger. It makes it sound like it's in a space or like further out. So just be wary of that. And then your reverb decay time is the last parameter of this chain I've built here, and that's basically how long your reverb is staying on for and how long each transient is getting delayed.
Your love leaves me wondering.
If I make this really short and I keep the reverb amount high, it gives this really cool effect of being in a small room.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt?
And that's for things like acoustic music. If you're recording a singer-songwriter and you want the voice to be sounding like you're in a small studio, you can achieve that here because the decay time is the amount of time it takes for the sound to go from where you're at to the wall and then back. So if you're in a small room, it's going to be a very short period of time, like, less than a second.
Your love leaves me wondering.
But if you're in a huge hall, it could be 4 seconds.
Your love leaves me wondering.
So those are the basic parameters here. One thing I didn't mention, and it's something that I did use in this reverb setting here, I figured I'd mention in the video, you don't necessarily have to know this if you're using my vocal chain, is never to crowd your high end or low end with verb as well. If you use too much high reverb, you're going to create this effect of multiple voices speaking to you at once. It's like using high delays. You're creating multiple voices of the same voice. And it's overwhelming, like 4 people talking to you right in your face, because the high frequencies are representative of that high and like poppy kind of tone. If you have 4 people talking to you right here, it gets really overbearing. So you're going to want to push those support voices and reflections back by rolling off some of the high end of your reverb. So even if you aren't using this vocal chain that I've supplied in this video, I hope these tips helped you with your own vocal chain. If you're in Logic or FL Studio or Pro Tools or what have you, hope these tips and techniques really helped you dial in what makes a good vocal chain. I also have one other vocal chain for you guys in Ableton here, and this is the vintage verb vocal chain. And this is essentially the same chain but with a better reverb. So if you play it back.
Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it. Holding on gets worse. Your love leaves me wondering.
And it's just a totally different tone. I think it sounds a little bit cleaner and more naturalistic, but that's, Valhalla versus the Ableton stock reverb. Ableton stock reverb's being built for the most efficient use of processor ever, so you can play it out live. Valhalla is obviously more of a studio plugin, so you're going to get better results out of that. So these are the 2 versions of the chain. You can download those in the description below, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video. And I hope that this video helped you out. To end things in this video, I'm going to write a little demo track to go along with this vocal that we've just processed. Hopefully you guys dig it, and I'm going to end the video with that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it. I try to make videos like this pretty often on this channel. And leave a comment down below if any of these tips helped you, or if you have any helpful tips about vocal chains and vocal processing of your own. I'm Julian of Julian Gray Media, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Here is the final track. All right, a few minutes later, and this is what I got for you. Let's go ahead and play it.
Am I a slave to your past? Are you the one to make it everlasting? Let me go like that. Your love leaves me wondering, can love outweigh the hurt? Oh, when the ending comes, it's never worth it. Holding on gets worse. Your love leaves me wondering. Your love leaves me wondering, wondering. Your love leaves me wondering, wondering.
Cool. That is a demo. Not the best thing I've ever written, but for like 10 minutes is fine. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to download the preset for yourself down below in the description. I'm Julian of Julian Gray Media. I hope this video helped you out, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.